Hello, welcome everyone. Happy Earth Day, happy National Poetry Month. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jen Maxey. I am the Assistant Director of Public Programs here at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. The Skirball is a cultural center and a museum deeply rooted in the Jewish value to honor memory, seek learning, and pursue justice. And before I introduce our esteemed guest tonight, I do want to thank Engaging the Senses Foundation for their generous support of this program. We are very grateful. Thank you to you all. We are so honored tonight to have Joy Harjo, the U.S. National Poet Laureate, with us. Joy will be beginning her third term as the National Poet Laureate and is only the second person to ever serve 3 terms and the first Native American to hold this honor. Joy is a renowned performer and writer of the Muscogee Nation, the author of 9 books of poetry, including, of course, An American Sunrise, the book that we are focused on tonight. And here, I must just urge everyone, please do go get this book. It is just stunning. And we will drop a link in the chat for you tonight. Our friends at Book Soup will have it for you. Joy's many honors include the Ruth Lilly Prize for Lifetime Achievement from the Poetry Foundation, the Academy of American Poets Wallace Stevens Award, 2 NEA fellowships, and a Guggenheim Fellowship. As a musician and performer, Joy Harjo has produced 7 award-winning albums, including her newest, I Pray for My Enemies, and I think we might hear some music tonight. Joining Joy for this conversation tonight is Louise Steinman, a wonderful friend of the Skirball, a writer, artist, and literary curator. Her work frequently deals with memory, history, and reconciliation. She's the author of 3 books, including The Knowing Body, The Artist as Storyteller in Contemporary Performance, The Souvenir, A Daughter Discovers Her Father's War, and most recently, The Crooked Mirror, a memoir of Polish-Jewish reconciliation. Louise was the founder and for 25 years, the curator of the Allowed Literary Series at the LA Public Library. She's a recipient of the 2019 Chora Prize for Lifetime Achievement in the Arts. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Louise Steinman. Louise, take it away.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's a real pleasure to be here at the Skirball, even virtually. And I want to thank the great Skirball team, Jen and Adele and Benina and Isabel and Larry for producing this program tonight. And I wanted to start with an acknowledgement that the land on which I sit and which literally sit, on which I stand every day and I'm speaking to you from, is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tongva people, the land caretakers of Tovangar, the Los Angeles Basin, and the South Channel Islands. And this was also the land that I was born on, near the Bayona Creek, which was a village site. And I know that there are people watching from all over the place, not necessarily in this place, but wanted to acknowledge that we are all here together. And what a great honor to be in conversation with our U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo, who is from a lineage of orators, painters, tribal chiefs, stomp dancers, preachers, sax players, singers, and she's a performer, a professor, a playwright, and a musician. So please welcome our U.S. Poet Laureate, Joy Harjo. There she is. Hi, Joy. It's great to see you again. Welcome to where we are. You are in Tulsa, is that correct?
Yes, thank you so much. It's good to be here at the Skirball. I've always wanted to be at the Skirball and then to be with you again, Louise. I remember when Crazy Brave came out of all the touring, I always remember speaking with you in LA, and I'm trying to remember where that venue was.
At the library downtown at the Central Library.
Yeah,
that was a beautiful performance you gave. And it's been such a great, especially for me at this time, to be immersed in your work has been so helpful. I want just to thank you, Joy, just as a way to reconfigure thinking about, where we are, about systems of land and earth and water and air. And it just feels like when I read you, all systems are working together. I mean, it really kind of like flushes me out. It's a beautiful book, the new book, American Sunrise. And I just learned that you have this new album out. I learned a few days ago, and maybe we could kick it off tonight with your playing us a cut from that album. That would be really great.
Yes, I will do that. I wanted to say that I'm over here. I'm speaking to you from Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is part of the Muscogee Creek Nation Reservation, reaffirmed recently by a landmark Supreme Court decision. And also meeting nearby are the, Osage Nation and the Cherokee Nation. And I'm just a few blocks away from Black Wall Street,
Wow.
where the Tulsa massacre occurred. And so anyway, I was born here. I was born here in Tulsa, and I think we all have this homing kind of instinct. We're still creatures after all. And I knew I would wind up back here. I knew I would, I did some time in LA too. I loved LA. But
it's funny because I kept thinking like, I'm not gonna live in LA. And when I came back here, it won't be forever, but I think partly during the pandemic, it's felt like, hey, this is home. This is home ground. And I've been recognizing that in a kind of more deep way, I feel like, in the last year. Maybe because we're not moving as fast, because I can take time to like look in the more micro way in the neighborhood, and that's been powerful. So I like that we're both on our home birthplace land.
Yes, and I think that this time has given us, we have to find home center wherever that is. I mean, we carry it around within us, and I think we all have that ache for home, and we know that home, this is home here, but we're aware of other resonances of home that we always carry with us. I'm going to play, I have a new album, I Pray for My Enemies, and I can put a link in the chat in a while. And this is one of what I did during the pandemic is, this is one of the projects. And this poem song, I Pray for My Enemies. I also play saxophone, soprano sax on this one, Lizette Garcia with backing vocals, and my two stepdaughters backing vocals too. Marissa Sepulpa, Sandra Sepulpa, and Barrett Martin on everything else. So I will play I Pray for My Enemies in just a moment here. Okay, here we go. This morning I pray for my enemies. And whom do I call my enemy? An enemy must be worthy of engagement. I turn in the direction of the sun and keep walking. It's the heart that asks the question, not my furious mind. The heart is a smaller cousin of the sun. It sees and knows everything. It hears the gnashing, even as it hears the blessing. The door to the mind should only open from the heart. An enemy who gets in risks the danger of becoming a friend. This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy? This morning I pray for my enemy. And whom do I call my enemy?
powerful. Thank you. Joy, that's such a radical idea, praying for one's enemies. It's so antithetical, in a sense, to kind of American tradition, as you know, it is taught. Can you tell us a little bit about how it came to you, how that song arrived for you?
Well, the poems and the songs, they always teach me something. I've come to have a great respect for the stuff of poetry. I mean, yes, we need our tools and our craft, and we have to hone those tools and continue, developing our ears and how the pathways we get to where we're going. But there's, where does the stuff of poetry come from? And I came to realize that the poems came through not just for me, but to teach something, even very young. I mean, poems came to me that were so much wiser than me. Give me something, I follow them. Yes, I revise, I use my tools, I work on the poems, but there's something larger that when I write it down, I'm working and then I write it down, I think, whoa, thank you. I would never thought of that, and these moments, it's kind of like a call and response that happens when you write. And, you're a writer, you understand that. That process is a kind of call and response where you can sit there and sometimes you think nothing's going to happen and sometimes it doesn't, it doesn't, or you can be sloshing along and so on and give up even. I had a day like that today. Sloshing along and think, oh my God, have I regressed, or it's never, and then it's just part of the process. And just like in history and what we're going through right now, we're in one of those sloshing along periods where we see glimmers, but we have to keep moving, and we have to keep use all of our tools to keep erecting these places so that wisdom given to us can live there and maybe live on to help our children and grandchildren, just like the wisdom of my grandparents, great-grandparents, and so on, come to help us. I have a passage in my new memoir, Poet Laureate, about my great-grandfather, Henry Marcy Harjo. I never met him in person. He was gone. He passed at 71, but he was quite a person in the community and very, beloved and respected. And he's always been there for me. And that might sound crazy, but he's there, and I've depended on him. And I've come to know him, and I've come to know him through writing too.
That's great. That's really great. The ancestors are such a presence all through your books. They really, I've been writing about my grandmother, her exodus, and yeah, it feels very close to that sense of she's really over my shoulder. Someone once said there's that phrase like, I said, like, I really missed my grandmother. And she said, well, you've eaten your grandmother. There's that phrase. It's sort of like she's in you now. I mean, she's part of you in that sense. And it seems like your great grandfather, do you feel like he's kind of coming through you in terms of story?
Yes, probably in a way. I wouldn't say eaten. That kind of that's,
No, it's a scary
but I
phrase.
get it. I get
Me
it.
when I said it, but I say that to myself sometimes, like it's a strange idea, but I kind of like that she dwells in me, in a certain way.
Yeah, a couple of things. Is that my mother. I remember I was with her the last months before she passed, and we were able to do healing, and she was quite amazing. And I remember sitting there with her one night, and she said she felt bad about how some things had gone, like we all have our regrets, but I came there to help her. I love her very much. I still do, and she helps me. But I remember she said, I will be closer to you when I'm gone.
Wow.
And she has been. She has been she's fought on my behalf. I know she has. She's been right there. And the other thing that's happened is, I was a mother very young. I was a teenage mother. My daughter was too. And then now I was a grandmother in my 30s, and I'm a great grandmother. And so what it enables you, I think that's why the ancestor, talking about poetry ancestors and familial ancestors, it became very apparent to me in this process of becoming that the story field, there's a field, there's essentially a field, and in which a family, or a certain line it's a living being. It is a living being. And I came to see how that whatever we put into, our children they deal with what we haven't fixed. We can't fix everything, but we need to continue working. And I had this sense one time I was really dealing with something, and I realized it was not mine. It was my mother's. And so I tried cleaning it. I started cleaning it. I don't know how to explain how I was doing that. But I started cleaning it, and so that it wouldn't pass on to the grandchildren and the children.
Well, there's a real presence in American Sunrise of generational trauma, that that the weight that one these ghosts of history, that the Trail of Tears is it's such a dark story. And we should say that when in American Sunrise, Joy goes back to where her family, where her people were basically literally removed. And today I just wanted to recommend too, in addition to Joy's book, I was reading up on the Red Sticks in Roxanne Dunbar's book, which was really helpful to go into some of the history of the expulsion. But you go back, tell us a little bit, you go back to this ancestral place in this book.
Yes, I remember the first time I went back to Alabama, what's now called Alabama. My family was from Alabama and Georgia, some even roaming down into Florida and so on. The first time I went back, I remember I was taken out to the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, where a lot of my relatives, including a great grandfather who I speak of a lot, in an American Sunrise, Manawi. But I went to that battlefield. I got bronchitis. I have never had bronchitis before or since, and the lungs hold grief. But I remember standing up to perform at Auburn University, right there in our homelands, so that whole area, and saying, I am a granddaughter of Manawi, the man you call Minowa. We call him, his name is Manawi, and I am his granddaughter. And I am not the only one. We are still here. There was a collective gasp that went up through that auditorium, because I was a ghost.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, didn't Jackson say, of the red, he says, they have disappeared from the face of the earth after Horseshoe Bend. That was his very phrase. So everything in terms of presence. And you also made, even when you made in some interview, you were talking about how there's this whole idea of disappearing indigenous people, as part of in the United States, but all through the Americas, this has gone on. And I love how in American Sunrise, you extend your investigation of this Trail of Tears to what's going on our border today. Which is very, very profound. And I wondered if you could say a little about what you think about borders in this moment. How are borders useful for a poet to think about in terms of moving through them or erasing them?
Well, they're artificial constructs. We've talked a lot about, there's been a lot of talk about false narratives, in the last few years. And I have a Poet Laureate project called Living Nations, Living Words. This is out May 5th. Well, you can't see because
We're going to put it in the chat so people can check in on it. It's amazing.
Yes, but that the concept was to make a map. I love maps. I figure what I'm trying to do in my poetry is to make a map of the soul, or a map of the history, a soul, the soul of, I love my people. I'm very connected to my people. And then, but a soul too, a map of the soul. And maybe that's what all poets are doing. We're all working on a map of the soul together. But I decided that I love maps. And so I went to the Library of Congress geography department and decided to do a project that would be a digital map that everyone could have access to, but it would show that Native people were still alive. There were many Native poets and were part of this land. And it was, so the map that I found to represent, because we looked through, they have a lot of maps, is a map with no borders.
Wow.
There are no, all we see is earth. We see the colors of earth, water, even sky. I mean, I don't know that you can see.
Who made this map? Where is it? Well, who made the map? What is the origin of the map itself? I mean, you started with a historical map that had no borders, in a sense, that was like.
No, it was a map in which we took off. There were no, it was just shows the earth. It just shows the earth. There are no state names. There are no English names of places, nothing. It just shows the earth before, without any false, with no false narratives. It just shows a map, beautiful earth, without these lines, without the borders. And so that gives you another way of experiencing place, or to see that we are earth. And so the poets, you can click on a poet because we see where they are living or where they've placed themselves. Some are in their homelands and they talk about that. Some have been moved from the Southeast, like the poet Jennifer Forrester, and is living in San Francisco. Others, so the poet will come up and speak a poem and talk about place. But my original idea was to have all the Native poets. We only have 47, but the idea was to have all the Native poets on here. So you would see a map full of Native poets to say, we are alive. We have many Native nations. We are living cultures. And then the next layer, I wanted to show how we're all related, because we all have close connections with non-Native poets, and we've been influenced. There's been
that's cool.
Cross-pollination, so to speak, or cross-cultural influence.
And jazz, and jazz, and
yeah, there's that. I mean, I wouldn't, I had great mentors and colleagues in, like June Jordan, for instance, and Audre Lorde and Adrienne Rich, and I was talking the other day about Alurista, and there's just, all of us. Sandra Cisneros and I went to Iowa together. We've been friends all this time, and we're still close friends. There's this, everybody would be on that map. And then the staff of the Poetry and Literature Center at Library of Congress, they're wonderful. And Rob is saying, well, we have a capacity. They were listening to me going, and then I want to do this and this. We have a person down in geography and maps who has other work, and here we are, and putting together the National Book Festival, and so, but it's a start, and these kind of maps are available for any organization to work on. But I think of it as a beginning, because it shows that ultimately, I think every voice, we forget how ultimately connected we are to, we are part of the earth system. We are the body, part of the body. And we forget that.
One of your poets, the first one I think leads off in this, is Ophelia Zepeda. I remember when she came to a library, I had her talk with other poets from different borderlands. She was quite beautiful. So that land straddles the US-Mexico border, which I just think is so eloquent. It's their land, it's their body. It doesn't have a division into, US, Mexico, and yet they have to deal with that reality, which is really hard, cruel.
Yeah, because those borders were not there, and there were natural migrations that take place. that have always taken place. I remember I was at a conference in 1990. I don't think most people knew this went on. It was a conference that the call went out to indigenous people from Arctic Circle all the way to Tierra del Fuego, saying, we are meeting outside in a native village outside Quito, Ecuador, because we need to talk about this Colombian quincentenary. We need to look at where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. And indigenous peoples came from all over the Western Hemisphere. And I remember being in a women's meeting, and there's this very striking Bolivian native woman stood up, and I don't know, I don't think she was joking, but she said she was surprised to see all the natives from the US there, because she said, I thought John Wayne killed all of you. And in a way he did. I mean, if you think about it, yes, because those images have power. The Westerns, so many people think we are dead because they don't see us in our outfits, but we don't see you in your traditional outfits either. We're all,
Right.
and
Right.
Then she said, and why do you call yourselves America? This is one body. I'll never forget it. And I've said it many times because it still resonates and it's still important. It's even more important than ever, is that this is one body. She is America. And I think that's what maybe we're starting to understand, like this earth, it goes even larger. This earth is one body.
In which the stones have rights and the waters have
Yes.
rights and voices, and the mountains do. And I wondered if you actually find it odd, or maybe not odd, that, I mean, you wrote how when you think of the whole earth itself is a teaching institution. Does the idea of Earth Day seem odd to you, when in a sense your poems and your works speak of honoring the earth, every sunrise, every sunset? I mean, does it seem like an odd construct, or do you think it's useful in this time?
Well, I mean, every day is Earth Day, so to speak. I mean, every day we eat gifts of the earth. Our computers are made with all of it is earth materials. It might be man-made, but it's where do the materials come from? Everything is a gift. There's some kind of sacrifice, some kind of sacrifice. But yeah, I mean, it does call attention. I mean, it calls massive attention to an honoring. I mean, I think the earth asks very little for humans, and the earth loves us very much because we're still here. And what do we give back but gratitude? And I think gratitude, you can't underestimate gratitude. And it's not just words, but gratitude in what you do, and gratitude for the gifts, for the gift of life, or wherever they come from these plants. Like this image behind me is from some older Muscogee Creek beadwork that I got to see years ago at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian archives. And I photographed, and then for these, I decided to kind of enlarge it for a background.
Great.
And you can see, so many of our designs are, all over the world. Indigenous, all peoples, our designs have.
At first, I thought it was Australian. It looked really, really reminded me of some work I'd seen from Australia, from Aboriginal paintings. I really love it. It's really
yes,
cool.
but it's all related to plants, or it's
Right.
a certain kind of point of view in which it's like you're looking at the plant. This is how it is. It's like you're looking at the plant as a person. You're looking at the plant as a person, and there's gratitude there, saying, okay, I see you, thank you. And there's again, like a call and response, back and forth, a kind of conversation, rather than looking down on the plant as something as a thing, or as something, as a slave, or to be colonized. But the plant is a living being, even with its own dignity. There's a robin around here I've been making friends with. And, you know, the robin, at first, robin will stop and talk with me, but they've taught me a lot. And I don't know why there's this connection. Well, there's a story in my book where I killed a robin as a child. And I won't go into that. You have to, it was a very painful kind of thing. And I was going through a lot as a kid, and it was a very strange thing that happened. But I've always felt this connection with them. And when I moved back, after I helped my mother pass, I'd been living in New Mexico and moved back. I knew I had to move back to Oklahoma. And I bought my sister's house, and she and her family had lived there for 35 years.
Hmm.
And every time I would see her, there was a robin family. And so there were generations, you know, I was dealing with like the great grandchildren of the robin family that had been there when my sister first moved and her husband first moved into that house. And when I moved there, you know, they had been living there all those years, and I came outside in the morning to give my thanks and my prayers, and this robin had a question. So I talked to him. You could talk to them in your heart, or however, you don't need words. And I told him, I'm her sister. I'm the sister of the woman who lived here. And he was satisfied with that. He was the one. There's always a messenger. You know, everybody has in our families, and usually the writers are the ones who are we're like the messengers in our families. We write things down. And we keep history and all that. Well, he was the he did that.
He was the robin historian.
Yes, he was. And anyway, and then I'd come out and play my flute, and he decided, they had a little conference and decided I was part bird. But when I moved from there, when I got with my husband and moved into his place, and I left, I felt so bad. I remember one morning I woke up, I was far from there. I sold that place, and I always miss that robin. And one morning I was missing the robin, my robin friend, so bad. I opened the front door, and there were like 50 robins out there.
I can see them. I can just see them.
And that made me, I thought, okay. And so I'm happy that there's a robin out here now that I've become friends with.
It makes me think of that beautiful Emily Dickinson poem. Something that about the first robin. She's one of your dear of your lineage, of your poetry mentors, right?
Yes.
I love that. I was thinking of another animal that you were very close with. You retell in Crazy Brave, you retell a creation story, a rabbit creation story. And I wondered if you would read that for us. It seemed very good for Earth Day, I thought.
Okay, yeah, Rabbit is up to tricks.
Rabbit is up to tricks.
Uh-huh. So Rabbit is a trickster figure for the Muscogee Creek people. I think the West Africans also, you know, Rabbit is also trickster. And of course, tricksters always, they always show us who we are. And if you'll notice that often the tricksters, the clowns, the jesters are seated near the seat of power. And the reason for that is that one, we cannot, if we start to take ourselves too seriously, that's when we fall. And two, those sitting near the seats of power need to be reminded that the power does not belong to them. It's to be shared. And sometimes the rabbit winds up in the seat of power in very strange times. But Rabbit is up to tricks. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was Rabbit fooling around with clay in the wind. Everybody was tired of his tricks and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person, and when he blew into the mouth of that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clay man how to steal a chicken. The clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. Then the clay man obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife. The clay man obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful. Clay Man felt important and powerful. And once that clay man started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. He wanted all the gold. Soon it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries, then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning for life. We began to forget our songs, our stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more, and Rabbit had no place left to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call the Clayman back, but when the Clayman wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he made a Clayman with no use.
I love it. And I love it that it's also the Gollum story. It's Frankenstein. It's, it's, I mean, when myth and poetry come together, it really is cross-cultural. I mean, those figures really do move through the eons.
I was really influenced by the Isaac how do you say his middle name? Bashevis Singer. I was on a kick of reading everything I could of his at one point. I love his stories and Gollum stories, because we do create. I mean, we do, with words are so powerful, and that's one thing I like about the Yiddish, the culture, is that understanding of how powerful words are, so that they can even run away, even a word can run away and take a life of its own. And what we say, we are literally creating this world by what we say and how we say it. And so in a way, and our thoughts are, they do become living. I mean, they make a presence, and that's why poetry is so cool, because you're making these beautiful and intense and presences that can be useful, not run away because they're angry.
And your breath in the sax too. I mean, that's I mean, it's that impulse. It's you're animating. You're animating through your breath. You talked about in Crazy Brave, well, a couple of in different ways how you came to poetry, and one of them was even before. I love the part where you're imagining the before you're born place, and that you were from the point of view of not being born in the world, that you were, quote, entrusted with carrying voices, songs, and stories to grow and release into the world, to be of assistance and inspiration. And in a way, that you wrote that well before you became Poet Laureate, but that seems like a great definition of what you are tasked with doing at this time, when there is so much fear and anger and divisiveness and intolerance, we're all tumbling around in. Was that and so there was that, and then there was when you write about the Kiva Club and being coming into another part of your existence, that you needed poetry to speak of these things, that you had to find it, and it had to find you, it sounded like.
I came to poetry for a sacred language, for a language that was beyond we need the ordinary everyday language, and even that can be polished up and shined and we could use more metaphor. All the language people in Navajo, Muscogee, Hawaiian that everybody's pointed to, and English, about how fewer, there's less and less use of metaphor. I mean, can you use metaphor in texting? For instance. But that's why I think poetry for me became a way to speak profoundly about what I had no words for.
And metaphor you've written is you feel like metaphor itself is a healing art. I mean that things, I mean the transformational nature of words, that you can take something that, of sadness or of darkness, and it can fly off. It could become a heart. It can become the damaged heart, you said, could become the white bird. What was that lovely? A damaged heart can become a white bird whose wings are larger than the sun. I kept thinking about that phrase, a damaged heart. And I wondered if it feels like our country has a damaged heart right now.
Yeah, I think that there's some problem with the roots. But yes, which affects the whole system. I think the country overall has a good heart. I mean, I think I've traveled certainly long before the Poet Laureateship, and I've been running around this country for 40 years, over 40 years, 45, and have met people from all over the world. I think this country ultimately has a good heart. It's and the roots, there are strong roots, but the indigenous people, and there's a lot of repair work that can be done. And it does come back to the stories and to recognition and gratitude and allowing, I suppose. Allowing.
It seems so significant now that in this moment we as we're in this first season of this new administration, that we have both you and Deb Haaland as as having agency. It feels I'm very grateful for that. And you've known her for a long time, right? Wasn't she one of your poetry students? Is that right? Can that be?
Yes, it is. I was teaching at the University of New Mexico, and I think it was in the 90s, early 90s. And I remember she came into my office with her motorcycle helmet, and she rode a motorcycle because of her care of the environment. It was a healthier alternative than a gasoline eating car. So that's always been Deb. She's a real deal. This is no political facade. She's real. I mean, she has a genuine care and concern, and she's a poet. She's a good poet. She's published as a poet.
I didn't know that. That's really cool. I want to throw in a question here from our Q&A. We've got a couple in there. Jim writes that he teaches at Juvenile Hall in San Diego, and he's taught your poems in the girls unit there, and they've been very well received. Especially, he says, when I teach, she had some horses. And he asks, what do you say to the girls about the importance of writing poetry during incarceration? And he wanted to thank you for helping his young students.
What I have found, I know it helped me, and it's helped a lot of people, because again, it helps you put into words what you have no words for. I mean, where are you going to put the stories that you've seen that aren't disturbing you? Once you get to Juvenile Hall, those kids have been through a lot. They've seen a lot. They wouldn't be there without a certain kind of story to get them there. And writing, I know for me, it helped me. It's a useful tool for any of us. It helps you get to know yourself better, to understand who you are, where you're coming from, and we don't always understand why certain things happen, and there's sometimes we will never understand. But writing helps us to construct, a place to stand. a place to stand in the story, a place to be able to plant your feet and to grow your heart, words, so I think it's one of the most important tools for young women. In fact, I have a story in my new memoir. I don't know if I could read it quickly, or I don't know if I could find it, but it was about my cousin. I had a cousin, Tiffany Harjo, and I was just looking at this, and if I can find it quickly, if not, I will just tell you the story. But I'll just tell you, it's going to be too much to find it and read it. But she was living in California, and she was in her 40s and wound up, I don't know what she was thinking. She wasn't driving a getaway car for somebody and wound up in prison. But she had quite a story that I told her. I said, what would help you is to write your story, because, write down your story. I said, write everything. I'll be your witness. I will be witness to your story. We all need witness. The whole story of America, we need to be, we're witness for each other. Black Lives Matter. We witness with each other, for each other, because ultimately we are each other. And so she wrote, and I said, if it's something you don't want me to read, just staple the pages together. So I got her writing materials and all that, and she would send me these packets full. I could hardly read some of it. It was so horrible things that she went through. And, and she just wrote and wrote and wrote. And it was helpful to her. That kind of, we all need witnesses for our stories, somebody to even just to sit and listen. There's a lot of power in that. I mean, I think that's why AA and so on, there's a lot of power in that, in telling your story and then having a witness. And somebody said that to me, yes, who was in Kiva Club. She's a journalist, Marley Shabala, and still works for Navajo Times. Wonderful. We were very involved in Native rights there. And then she said something about,
this is in the 70s, is that?
Yes. And anyway, recently we were texting each other, or sending messages, and she said something about how, there's few of us who share, at least there's another person we share a story. There's something too about that too, to have others alive who know the story and can share it. And what happens when we lose those people, or what happens when our stories, say the story of removal, the stories of real people are lost, and we're turned into stereotypes, turned into stereotypes, or that have nothing to do with our human beingness. And that's part of the loss.
What you say about witness makes me think about the work with veterans I've done some of, and inspired by Maxine Hong Kingston's The Voices of Peace, Voices of War, Voices of Peace. Just what it means to testify in front of other people who can understand. Those were very difficult and healing workshops, but the writing really, to put the story down is of inestimable, power, I think. So,
which gets back to the girls in the juvenile facility. That's part of it, is like, yes, I am not alone. There are others here. I did not have to allow shame to take over. Once you can get it out, it doesn't become poison.
Right. Beth asks, what do you think are the keys to vibrancy as we women particularly age?
I think the key to vibrancy is, one, we keep growing. I started learning to play saxophone when I was almost 40.
That's amazing.
And we tell our, I guess, society, and then we start telling ourselves that we're too old, or it's, the spirit has no age. Yes, I mean, we'd have to deal with the effects of age and so on, but we're here to take every minute that we can to 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 grow knowledge and to grow passion, compassion. That's part of passion. Passion is part of compassion. Interesting. So, but we're here, we're here to grow and to, and there's always somebody who could use your assistance in some way or the other.
Beth's other question was, I noticed that your poems may lose or change words as they age. When is a poem finished?
They're usually, by the time I put them out, there's a few that I change up a little, because it's sort of like when you put out an album of music too, a new album, and you haven't played everything a lot. When you start really moving into it, then you find new things, or it shifts that way. And that's what happens, I find, with poetry. It's not that I'm not done, but then once I'm out there and I stretch it with my voice and perform it, then there are tweaks that happen because of using it and because of learning it and moving with it. And sometimes things will change inadvertently, and some, I think, what might make it a better poem.
So you give yourself that permission when you perform it to make those changes.
Yes, but I don't obsessively go back and bother all. No, I don't do that. It's just some of them, and I'll think, oh, okay, this sounds better without this.
I love that little story in Crazy Brave, where you said, or maybe it was in talking about it, you said that, it took you a long time to write it. And finally, was it your editor said, we're calling it in. I love that phrase, we're calling it in. And then you kind of looked and you went like, oh, I'm not 7 years late, I'm 14 years late. And then you actually wrote it, which I thought was the best part of the story. The story you were meant to write.
Yeah, I had to give up and write it because I'd been fighting the story. I had lots of
It's a hard story in a lot of places. I mean, the stuff it's tough.
Yeah.
I wanted to, we're getting near the end. I wanted to say that there's a poem of yours that I excerpted as the epigram for my book, The Crooked Mirror, which is about Polish-Jewish reconciliation. There's reconciliations need to happen all over the world, but it's an excerpt that it's a little piece that's helped me so much in these days, and I refer to it so often. It's "Oh Sun." Do you know it by heart, or is it okay if I read it, Joy?
Which one is that?
It's just a little. It goes, "Oh sun, moon, stars, our other relatives peering at us from the inside of God's house."
Yeah, go ahead and read it, because that's from Map to the Next World, I think.
"Oh sun, moon, stars, our other relatives peering at us from the inside of God's house, walk with us as we climb into the next century, naked, but for the stories we have of each other. Keep us from giving up in this land of nightmare, which is also the land of miracles." And I come back to that so much these days, and I just feel like your work, it won't let us give up. And I just wanted to really thank you for that. I think we need to hear that.
Thank you. That's from Reconciliation.
It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. It's a beautiful, beautiful poem. Would you like to close with any other poem before I turn over to Jen and thank all our wonderful people? We're out there wherever you are. We can't see you, beautiful people. Did you want to end with a poem, Joy?
I almost want to play Rahim Al-Hajj's.
Would you?
I'll end with Remember. I think Remember would be a good one. And I will find it here. And this is featuring Rahim Al-Hajj on oud. I got to meet him in Albuquerque, wonderful player. And
cool.
remember the sky you were born under. Know each of the stars' stories. Remember the moon, know who she is. Remember the sun's birth at dawn. That is the strongest point of time. Remember sundown and the giving away tonight. Remember your birth, how your mother struggled to give you form and breath. Your evidence of her life and her mother's and hers. Remember your father. He is your life also. Remember the earth whose skin you are. Red earth, black earth, yellow earth, white earth, brown earth. We are earth. Remember the plants, trees, animal life who all have their tribes, their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them, they are alive poems. Remember the wind, remember her voice, she knows the origin of this universe. Remember that you are all people, and all people are you. Remember, you are this universe, and this universe is you. Remember, 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 remember. Remember the sky, remember the earth, remember the sun. Remember the moon. Remember your birth, your death too. Remember, remember, remember your father. Remember your mother. You are this earth, this earth is you. Remember, remember.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So beautiful to talk to you. Thank you, Joy. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you too. I enjoyed our conversation and getting the opportunity to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Joy. That was so beautiful. I hate to even say anything after that. It was just so beautiful, but I do need to come on and say, let me start my video. It says to start my video. I just wanted to come on and thank you all for being here. Thank you, Louise Steinman, for a wonderful program, moderating a wonderful program. Thank you, Joy. What a treasure you are. We are so lucky to have you as our Poet Laureate yet again. How lucky are we? The book is beautiful. We did put the link in the chat for you. Also, we have a link in the chat to Joy's project, the Living Maps project, which is also really beautiful and amazing. So do check that out. We also did link you to her song, I Pray for My Enemies, on Spotify, in case you want to look that up. Please do check us out at the Skirball, skirball.org. We have a lot of wonderful programs coming up, virtual. We will soon enough be announcing a live music series at the end of the summer. And we will be opening to the public in limited capacity. We are opening an exhibition on May 15th of Ai Weiwei. We will be opening Ai Weiwei's Trace. And you know, Joy, Ai Weiwei, we interviewed him and he said the same thing you did. He talked about one body. And when you started to talk about that, and as you know, his work is so focused on the displacement of people all over the world, that really resonated for me. So I can't thank you both enough. It was a wonderful, wonderful way to spend Earth Day. We wish you all very well, and please do come visit us at the Skirball. We hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.